What's up, y'all? It's your boy Karas, and I'm bringing you the updated tier list for the War Within Season 1 for PvP. Um, this is kind of what I've come up with for all of it. There's a lot of class changes, a lot of things are changing, a lot of things are also staying the same, which is, depending on who you ask, a good and a bad thing, right? So, um, some interesting comps are going to come back. A lot of people might not be happy about them. Some people will be. Beast Cleave, Turbo Cleave, Shadow Play is even stronger than it was before. Um, MLP, still just as wild and wonky as ever. So, I'm going to just start it up from the top, work my way from the left to right, down to the bottom, right? Basically like reading a book. For Druid, I've got the patch notes right here. They're just getting a buff. PvE buff. They just do more damn. Big Pharaoh bits all day. They're S tier. They do tons of damn, tons of utility, tons of everything, right? Just whew. Assassination, rogue utility, tons of damage, just overall. They can growth silence everybody around them. They just hemotoxin, kidney, blind, just everything. They're just ridiculous. Subtlety to the right is same thing. Not the same amount of sustained damage, but the ability to, dump their load on someone and get all their cooldowns are really pretty much close, and then being able to duel the healer and get cooldowns from the healer, and then into a blind, and then a cheap shot or kidney into a bunch of cheap shots on who they're trying to kill. Subtlety is still really strong. Marksman is phenomenal. It is doing a ton of damage with Wailing Arrow. I think Marksman's a lot overtuned right now. I think it's ridiculous how much Marksman's actually doing. They can shoot you from a million yards away. They just do more damage. Feral's getting buffed. Well, guess what? Because Feral's getting buffed, now this is even stronger. BM Hunter, a lot of people were saying that spec was dog shit. Was not the case. It was strong, maybe not as strong as Survival and Marksman, but it was still pretty strong. The pets, I was thinking, just like everybody else was, the pets are gonna die. The pets don't die. Even if the pets die, hunter pets die. Pet classes, their pets die. If you don't manage it, your pets are gonna die, right? And they're getting a huge buff here down in PvP changes. So they've got a kill command increased by 15%, cobra shot increased by 15%, kill shot increased by 40%, barb shot increased by 20% PvP combat. That's huge. Fury Warrior. Everybody's bitching about Fury. I know, Fury's strong. Yeah, I got nerfed. 15% to Odin's Fury, 10% to Bladestorm. And it's still S tier. So, for all y'all that are thinking, oh man, I'm going to have to go arms because they're nerfing Fury tremendously. Well, you can still keep running the build you're running. Nothing changes. Or you can just go Mountain Thane. They're buffing Mountain Thane, by the way. 6% buff. All the way to Mountain Thane. Yes, they are nerfing him by 3. Bladestorm reduced by 10%. Sorry, I still got kind of gold. Odin's Fury damage increased by 15 or reduced by 15%. Could you imagine if it was increased? Oh boy, all the people would be crying. But no, Mountain Thane. Here's the thing: Bloodthirst and Rampage damage increased by 20, up from 15. Odin's Fury or your Rampage and your Bloodthirst. So Bloodthirst is a really, really weird ability. It's probably one of the weirdest abilities in the game. The scaling for it is absolutely wild. Uh, it can hit as little as 100k or well up to a million, depending on what talents you take, and if you're running Crushing Bloodbath or not. You would not think Bloodbath can hit for a million. It can. It can hit for a lot, and it does. It hits for a lot. It can hit just as bad as hard as Execute, as Slayer Execute. It does hit very, 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 very hard. And the fact that you can run pure, pure normal frenzied enrage and just mow people down with Mountain Thane is actually kind of funny. But anyway, to move on to Unholy. So the pets are being nerfed, I believe, by 50%. Your disease is being nerfed by 25% when it comes to the Frost Fever. Indirect nerf to Frost, but Frost is usually one of those specs. They hate it so much that they just want to not even see it played. Riders of the Apocalypse, nerfed by 50% in PvP combat. I think that nerf is honestly overkill. It is almost criminal how much they nerf it. I think Blizzard overreacts to Death Knights every time. They basically gutted the Riders of the Apocalypse. Um, and that affects Frost as well, but then again, Frost and Unholy do have two other talent trees that are still doing good damage, but we'll see. We'll see. I still want to try to make the Frost work, but Frost is lackluster, to say the least. And Saline is getting buffed. Frost or Unholy does like the haste from Saline, and you're still doing a ton of damage. So Vampiric Strike proc chance is increased from 10% to 25. That's actually huge. Because that actually gives you a chance to actually have some damage outside of your Dark Transform and maintain your buff and just deal a ton of damage overall. And actually, your Vampiric Strike will actually just do more damage and be a lot more impactful. Your sustained damage will be a lot higher. And your disease damage, believe it or not, will actually be a little bit higher. Because after that Vampiric Touch wears off, if your Virulent Plague, I believe, is on the target, and it also extends it, and let's say that plague will hit someone for 400k, right? You hit them with that, either that clawing shadow or oh boy, what is it called? Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. The other one, Plaguebringer one. And Festering Wound, I've seen it hit for 800k. It just hit pretty decently hard. So, and this is even making it better. Visceral Strength increased by 8%, was 6, so that's just a flat 33% buff to that specific thing. Fixed an issue with Visceral Strength, modifying Strength base instead of total Strength. So that was a bug that was fixed for Sand Lane, which is actually kind of really good, because it means our because all our modifiers on strength are already really, really high. Ooh, let's see what that does. So Frost, that's a really interesting one. I've been really interested by the Sand Lane build because it just gives you a lot of sustain versus Riders of the Apocalypse. Blood. I'm just gonna get blood right out of the way. All this is just blood stuff too. Now your Vampiric Strike damage and stress increased by 20%. Infliction of Sorrows deals 15% of the damage. Remaining over time was 10. It's just a flat buff to blood. Discipline, not really any changes in these patch notes. Still the best healer in the game. Does damage even if it's CC'd. Can get out of anything. Can fade anything. Great utility. The dome thing that's on the ground. Rapture. Damage. Healing. Basically another DPS that does healing. Buffs the team with PI and Dark Wings. A lot of damage. Some slight Affliction. Warlock nerfs. So your Shadow Bolt will be doing 25% less damage, I believe. And your Corruption will do 10% less damage. Shadow Bolt reduced by 15% in PvP combat. Unstable Afflictions being buffed by 30%. Unstable Affliction backlash damage increased by 25%. Well, so it's already hitting for, I believe, 2.2, 2.3. So now it'll be... Ooh, math. So there will be 3. So don't dispel that. Otherwise, you may just instantly die. And Soul Harvester, Neck-like Teachings now increases the damage of Shadow Bolt and Drain Life by PvP by 10%, was 20. So just a flat 25% nerf to Shadow Bolt. Thank God. I hated being one shot by a goddamn Shadow Bolt for 1.3 million. That shit was crazy. Frost Mace doesn't need an introduction. They nerfed Ice Lance a whole bunch. Still does a ton of damage. Still endless. Just cast while moving, can blink through stuns, can decurse for Shami hexes. Overall, has some of the best toolkit in the game. Just absolute nightmare for all melee. Still does a ton of damage. And I believe they are getting nerfed in their tree here. Just want to make sure. Oh, no. Just Arcane. I believe so. Arcane is getting nerfed by 5%, and then 8, and then Sun Fury Meteorite damage reduced by 15. And then more nerfs to Sun Fury. Burden of Power reduced by 20% was 30. So some slight buffs, I guess. Burden of the Sun bonus for... Oh, so yeah, that's another nerf for Arcane. So Arcane got some pretty sizable nerfs. Shadow Priest, it's getting buffed. 6% flat buff. They were already doing a lot of damage anyway. Great team utility, grip, life swap, all that. PI, relatively good sustain, good burst, everything else. This Outlaw combat spec is getting nerfed a little bit. Their flat rate damage is getting nerfed, but their set bonus is getting some huge set buffs as well. So I think they're kind of just... Here's your set bonus that's getting buffed, and then your baseline's getting nerfed a little bit to make up for it, because I believe Outlaw is still a proc. Yeah, Outlaw is still a proc base spec. All ability damage reduced by 4, melee auto attack damage reduced by 8, dispatch damage reduced by 10. The War Within season 1 set or 2 set. Now grants a 35% chance to deal 30% increased damage as Shadow. Obviously, that's quite a bit. That's 15% in PvP, and the 35% increased chance is a pretty high chance. 4 set in between the eyes increased to 15% damage per stack, up to 4 was 6 and 3 stacks. So that's just more damage. Enhance is one of those classes that's... The talent tree is kind of a mess, but you can buff some things so much to the point where it's crazy. All abilities increased by 4%. Your Witch Doctor ancestry, so instead of every Maelstrom you generate and knock 2 seconds off your wolves, now it's 1. Just to get it straight out of the point. The 2 set is just getting a buff. I believe this was 15, and then it was 6, and then it was 10. Now it's 10. This will be 5% in PvP. But it's better than 3, which is still a buff, and they're buffing it by 4%. And they are also buffing it in the PvP down. Storm Strike damage increased by 20. Wind Strike damage increased by 20. So just the Storm is just being buffed. Ice Strike, well, guess what? Ice Strike is also in that. So Storm is just getting straight up buffed. Everything about Enhanced is just getting buffed. All of your normal rotational buttons are just getting buffed. Lava Lash by 20, Fire Nova. What the hell is Fire Nova? It's an AoE spell that does like 60k damage. It's nothing. I don't even think it spreads Flame Shock, and I believe it's capped at a certain point. But it can't hit everything, so if they're all stacked together, it can actually do some pretty decent chunk damage. So that there might be some battleground play that could be good, but maybe some pet classes where it could actually chunk. It might be good, but you know, like I said, 40% is still 40% buff. Havoc is looking crazy. So the thing with Havoc is they are really, really getting the kick in with their I-beam. So their I-beam was bugged apparently, and their lone or whatever it was also bugged. Isolated prey. So fixed an issue that caused I-beam damage to be reduced beyond one target instead of 5. So yeah, that's a huge one because that actually means their I-beam is actually worth a fuck. And can actually do some crazy cleave damage now. Fixed an issue that prevented I-beam from benefiting from isolated prey's damage. I didn't even know that was a bug. Fixed an issue that prevented I-beam from benefiting from chaotic disposition's damage bonus. That's huge. That's huge. I-beam, that's fucking massive. But the problem with DH, why it's not S tier, is it's super squishy. It does do a lot of healing, but you get stunned, you instantly die. Moving on. Demonology. You are basically at the bottom of A tier. Maybe B+. Deathstroke and Outlaw do everything you do better, and you have a Mortal Strike. But every other class has a Mortal Strike, so why do you even play with you? Basically. Your pets can be CC'd, rooted. Mages are good. A lot of classes are good that can just root your shit and walk away from it. Arms Warrior, same thing. Demolishes basically a dead spec. They're buffing it by 20% for the 2 initial strikes, but then nerfing Blade Storm by 10%, so now it's even worse. Resto, they are buffing, I believe, let's see, it's in the normal talents, or in the normal PvE changes that it does affect PvP. Let's see here. I believe it's alphabetical. Yep. So here we go. Ferocious, or no, that's feral. All healing increased by 8. Does not affect PvP. Wrath damage increased by 20. Starfire damage increased by 20. And Star Surge increased by 20. That's actually pretty big. There could actually be some weird play with Outlaw and maybe Resto and 2s where they just do unhealable dam together, and the Resto does huge dam, and they run that whole I get mana back from spamming Star Surge as much as possible. We'll see. We'll see, you know. They could still do a ton of dam, right? They were doing a ton of dam before they got nerfed in that way. Oh boy. The epitome of my hatred for this spec is unwarranted, but all the way warranted. Okay, so Devastation. It is being nerfed by 20%. And I believe, yes, the Disintegrate, even for the Prez, is being nerfed by 20% in PvP. It's no longer increasing PvP by 20%. Thank God. But I think they're also buffing some other stuff for them as well. And yep. Disintegrate damage increased by 10%. And then a turn is surge. So a 10% nerf to Disintegrate. But then, yeah, they're just buffing Eternity Surge by 10%, so they're not really losing a whole lot. But the Prez is losing that 20% healing buff to their Living Flame or Chrono Flame, depending on their PvP talent. Still, they're still crazy. Best healing, they don't they just deal a ton of damage. Oh, really great CC, great team utility, absolutely counters. Fury Warrior and um, Assassination and Feral Druid, it stops or go. Um, they're always going to do really good in these comps, but they'll suffer into things like Hunter because they're not going to be able to move. And if you accidentally range them, because the range is what, like 25, 30 yards is not very much. So Augmentation Evoker. Same strengths as Devastation and Prez. Great team utility, CC. Really annoying, stuns everything. Doesn't always do the biggest damage, but still actually does pull off some decent chunk damage. And actually buff some classes like Windwalker, Fury, and a lot of other classes that actually do a lot of damage, and they actually make those classes even crazier. And if you let the Perez just cast, they can actually do a lot of damage. I know a lot of people are like, I haven't seen a lot of them because they're kind of an odd spec, but when you actually do see them and they play well with someone, they're actually a really scary spec. Ret, your Sunlight Herald of the Sun dot thing is getting nerfed by 15%. You're already super squishy. You're going to basically fall apart into any melee cleave, caster cleave, anything like that. Mages are going to destroy you. Rets are not bad by any means, but they are extremely, extremely squishy. And you can basically just run them into the wall, and they just die. Regardless of what spec you play, if you just go full Zug Zug on a Ret, they just die. Windwalker. Windwalker is a scary DPS. They deal a ton of damage. They have great damage. They're really annoying, super disruptive. They knock you into the air. I believe, depending on the talents they take, they can knock you in the air twice. Great damage. Fantastic damage. But after the cooldowns, after the defenses are up, same thing with the Demon Hunter. They're just going to die. Destro. Huge buffs. So, all the way down we go. Chaos Bolt damage increased by 15% in PvP combat. Incinerate damage increased by 15% in PvP combat. Soulfire damage increased by 15% in PvP combat. Decimation now reduces the cast time of Soulfire by 60% in PvP combat. Was 80, so a slight nerf. Wither damage reduced by 30% in PvP combat. And then Diablo's Ruination damage increased by 15% in PvP combat. So Destro is more of a weird Affliction Warlock. Now they're trying to make it more of a, oh look, you're actually like burning people to death spec instead of a weird Roth spec. That doesn't really do a whole lot. Maybe you'll kill something, maybe you won't. Who really knows? Maybe now they'll actually pull forward. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Overall, Arcane's just getting nerfed. 5% Arcane Barrage, or PvP or their hero talents are just getting nerfed. Arcane Barrage 8%, Arcane Blast is 5, I believe. We can look at this right here. Arcane Blast damage reduced by 5, Arcane Missiles reduced by 8. And then they've got the changes in their talent tree, Sun Fury. So, Meteor damage reduced by 15%, Sun Fury, Burden of Power, damage from bonus. For Arcane Blast reduced to 20% was 30. So just their damage bonus is getting a 33% nerf on that. Resto Shaman. So the same problem that Resto Druid has. They are getting a 12% buff to their Lava Burst and their Lightning Bolt by 12%. But if they don't have the globals for it and they're spending all their time healing, they just fall behind. As far as doing damage compared to like a Prez or a Discipline, their healing is really good, but they just tend to fall behind. Same issues with Resto Druid, they just tend to fall behind. Same problem that Holy and basically every other healer in the game has. Discipline and Prez are really like the two go-to healers for most things, and it's really kind of toxic, but it is what it is. Um, Resto has its place. It's very disruptive, very annoying. Shaman utility, times 2 tremor, rounding, stun, static. You get the deal. Very disruptive. Elemental. Elemental is one of those weird specs, man. You never know what it's going to do, right? It either does great sustain damage the entire game, has great off healing, has great things about it to make it really good. I don't know. It's a weird one, right? So I've seen some elementals that kill you in 2 seconds or less, or some that never do anything. And the ones that kill you in 2 seconds or less, it's kind of gimmicky. It really kind of is. But you just kill their totem off their primordial wave. That gets rid of a lot of damage, right? So, and you can just train them into the ground. They'd eventually just fall over and die. So that's where elemental sits. It's not bad, but it's not the best. Put it in low A, B plus. Destro or Demo, the other one with the D in it. I took some time and thought about it. I fought in a couple Demolocks. It's not doing well. Not for the reasons I think. All the specs that are really strong that have AoE roots and stuff like that are really strong right now, and or are getting strong right now. Enhancement's getting, but all these other specs are getting buffed. If they can root your pets don't do damage. You fall behind. You do have a mortal strike, but the issue is in reality is every other spec has a mortal strike. The 2 other warlock specs do better than you overall. Why play with the Demonology when you can play with an Affliction Warlock? And they don't DR with you with your stuns. So that's another thing. You can still play with with the Unholy DK and still have a lot of play and a lot of things. And Demo is still tankier than the other 2 specs. So there is some things about Demo that are unique, but it's not by much, it's still. And you buff enhancement shamans by having pets. So it's kind of a hit or miss, right? It's depends on what you queue into. You could just be a wet noodle, or you could be having the time of your life with Demo. Prot Warrior, it's fucking insane. They buffed Mountain Thane. Do 6% more damage from everything that you have in that tree, from lightning strikes to thunderclap to everything else. You're a warrior. You have warrior utility. You're tanky as prot. You don't have the damage reduction that Fury and Arms have from sitting in Desance. You don't have the problem as you do with Arms, where you just get globaled and die instantly. You're more annoying than an Arms warrior. And Arms and Prot are kind of doing relatively the same kind of damage, unfortunately. Arms still does pull ahead, Arms damage wise, but Prot's just so much tankier. There's just so much more ignoring pain and healing that if you're gonna play Arms, you might as well just play Prot, because Prot's just hitting just as hard overall. I've had Shield Slam hit for 1,000,000. I've had Executes hit for 1,000,000. I've had Thunderclap hit for 500,000, 600k, 700k with Mountain Thane. It's Demolish hits just as hard. Even though the 2 initial strikes for Arms Demolish are being increased, yes, it's Demolish. Anybody can walk out of it, blink out of it, roll out of it, leap away from it. you have to secure it with a stun. If someone trinkets or whatever, you can say, we'll use spear. Spear's too long to cool down. You can have Thunderous Words on a 45-second cooldown and buff your damage by 5% every time, and have a lot of extra effects that you get just by having that. Blood Decay is just getting buffed. Your Sandling's getting buffed. Your Empiric Strikes are going to do more damage. Everything about Blood's just getting buffed. You're annoying as hell as Blood. You're relatively tanky, a little bit squishier than Prop Warrior in some instances, but you're still really annoying. You can use your grips as a pseudo kick on a 15-second cooldown. You can talent into a shorter Mind Freeze at from 13 to 13 seconds, I believe, or 12 seconds. So, really good. Holy Priest. Ooh, no damage reduction. Your throughput healing is actually really high, and your damage actually isn't too bad. But depending on what that priest takes, oh boy, you just fall behind every way. You just doom. You have to heal through that damage. Well, it costs mana, and if you can't do damage, your team falls behind in 2s. In 3s, maybe some casters by being able to immune. Yeah, you could probably get away with it. Holy, I've definitely seen a lot more Holy Priests than I have seen Mistweaver. And they aren't too bad. They aren't too shabbaroo, but still. I think it's more of a fan favorite that's still good, but they fall behind in some key ways, and that's kind of where they suffer. But no damage reduction. They don't do as much damage as this. Yes, they do have the Guardian Spirit, and it's kind of, it's meh. It's right now, it's just all damage. It's sending that damage. What healers, all the healers that are really good right now are basically doing damage and healing at the same time. Again, damage and healing at the same time. Holy tends to kind of do some of that, but it's, if you're doing damage, you're not healing. It's, if you're doing damage as Disc, you're healing. If you're doing damage as Prez, you're also healing, or you're getting mana back. To move it on to Mistweaver, you're just getting fucking nerfed again. Your let's see, PvP talents, because that's where it's at for Mistweaver. Your Peace Weaver thing here. Is getting nerfed again. So they just nerfed this again. I don't know why the fuck they nerfed it. It doesn't make any sense. So your Peace Weaver PvP talent now reduces the cooldown of revival by 30 seconds. Was 60. This used to be 90. So Fist Weaving is even more dead because now you can't immune on them 1 minute 30 anymore. And kind of like stagger your trinket and your things. Now it's a 2.5 minute cooldown. And not like Mistweaver healing was that great anyway. I think about Fistweaver was, you were squishy, you also had to be up in the enemy's face, so you were susceptible to CC. And as Mistweaver, you can't push forward with the melee team at all because you require a ton of globals, and you just tend to attract getting kicked in the face by everything. Mages, just a mage will blink into you just to get a kick, and you already require 2-3 globals to even start healing. Even catch up is where every other healer just presses one button and you're healed, right? This requires a lot more than that. If you cocoon somebody, well, cocoon is kind of a pile of garbage right now, so they just kind of tend to rip right through it. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, fucking cocoon. Well, that's more damage for me on this one target. I'll just rip right through it. Shatter it with the Wrecking Blade, and there's a million off of it. Oh boy, I've got a 36% Mortal Strike on them too. So it's even smaller than it was beforehand. And oh, what do you know? I've ripped through it in 5 seconds and I'm ripping their teammate in half again. They don't do any damage as before. Any healer that's doing damage is always going to pull ahead. Holy, yes, they are buffing the damage tremendously. Let's see, where is it at? So, Judgment damage increased by 60%. Crusader Strike damage increased by 20%. Ever of Wrath damage increased by 20%. Oh boy. Your Avenging Crusade transferred from 260 was 420, so I believe, yeah, that's definitely a nerf. Holy Prism, single target damage increased by 100%, and area of effect damage increased by 50%. If there's some weird Shockedin build that can be viable, that would be amazing. I would love to play that with like an enhancement or something. That would be hilarious. But, but, they their bops are weak. Every class that's good right now has a Dispel. They instantly get shredded. Fire's getting a 6% buff all the way up here. And a 25% Living Bomb buff by 25%. Frost and Fire, man, they're competing to be the worst specs in the game. Frost was really good in the pre-patch. They just nerfed Frost Fever by 25% because it used to be 25% increased damage in PvP combat. The Riders of the Apocalypse got nerfed by 50% in PvP combat. So really the last real thing, because the thing with Riders of the Apocalypse, it made your Obliterates hit like a goddamn train. And now that that isn't the case, Dual Wield is going to suffer, and we'll see how that goes for Frost. But Frost is already not doing that great. It's falling behind. It doesn't have any passive mitigation like Unholy does with Necrotic Wounds. I was really thinking maybe it'd have some kind of mitigation with Deathbringer and some haste and whatever else. But if you don't have any crit as Dual Wield, you don't really crit, so you don't really get killing machines. You don't really do any pressure. So that's kind of a problem. Even if you do run the big gimmicky one shot, you tend to still fall behind. You know, so many classes have so much more damage. If you don't do high sustained damage, you just fall behind and die. To move on to the last four specs, I either have seen none of them or nobody's pressing with them. I've seen maybe one Brewmaster. They do deal a good amount of damage. They are fairly annoying, I guess. But Windwalker just does it better, and Windwalker actually has Immortal Strike and actually does way more damage. Prot Pally has some amazing team utility, but I can just stun their angel thing and then kill them. But same thing is, they're a Paladin. Evokers are good, Shamans are good, everything with a Purge right now is good. They fall behind, their bops are useless. Prot Pally actually does do a surprisingly good amount of damage, but that's just the thing. PvP is not just damage. So they tend to fall. They're just flat on their face. This is where the other two tank specs, Blood and Prot, just deal a ton of damage, have great utility, and have a reason that makes them special. Like Blood can just kidnap healers. Prot Warrior can just do Prot things and peel for everybody and be super disruptive. And you know, Prot Pally, yeah, it's disruptive, but it's not as disruptive as Prot Warrior. So there's the tier list. I hope y'all liked it. Updated tier list for the changes that have come through, and y'all have a good one. See you later.